I bought this car at the end of 1984 in Germany from the Mercedes dealer called Otto Becker. It's the official Mercedes dealer. I bought the car new. I had just taken my company public, and back in those days, everybody who was doing that was buying Ferraris and stuff like that. I decided I didn't want a Ferrari. I wanted to buy a really nice sedan car like this one that was suitable for showing off from being, company CEO and all that stuff. And then I also bought a Mazda RX-7 GSL SE, which this was the nicest car that Mazda ever made. That was my sporting car. I bought that one for fun, and I bought this one for business purposes, but it's also fun. It's a good, really good, solid car. So I bought it at the end of December. I drove it around Germany for about a month. That made it be a used car for purposes of importing it to the States. And I gave it back to Otto Becker, who put it in bond, who then brought it back to the United States. They shipped it. Before they did that, they added air conditioning, which it didn't originally have air conditioning. It was a German model car. It's got a full German setup, which did not include air conditioning. I had them add air conditioning, and they also did the catalytic converter edition, which was required to import it to the United States. But I drove it for about a month, drove it all over the place, just loved driving on the Autobahns at 230 kilometers an hour, and just toured the hell out of it for about a month, gave it back to Otto Becker, and they brought it in for me. The next time I saw it, it was when it came out of bond. This was in Texas, and I ended up driving this car. Between this car and my RX-7 GSL SE, those were my two daily drives, and I alternated the two cars between every other day, and I did that for about 30 years. And in 2014, I ended up buying a electric car. I decided I wanted to try an electric car, and that made that be my everyday drive. And my two other cars didn't get very much use. I ended up selling the Mazda RX-7 GSL SE, which I hated to do, but I did that because I had no space in my garage for that many cars. And I held on to this one until now. I now need space in my garage for something else my wife is requiring. And so I'm seeing if I can find a good home for this car. It's been a good car for me. It has had very little driving since, as I said, I bought my electric car in 2014. It's now 6 years later. It's set in the garage most of the time. I'll take it out, a couple of times a year just to keep everything running. And of course I have to go get inspection every year. This will show you it was inspected in September of this year and passed inspection. I ended up not putting very many miles from 2014 until now. It's probably a couple of hundred, maybe 100 miles a year, something like that. Very little mileage on it in the last 6 years. It's mostly been sitting in my garage, and it gets out just a couple of times a year in order to keep everything running. There is an important factor that I will point out, and that is you will have noticed maybe that my odometer stays on 131,310. That's because 2 years ago, when I was taking it out for a spin to go get it inspected, I ended up resetting the trip gauge. And when the trip gauge reset, I heard a little pop. And then from that point on, the odometer has not been registering, which is unfortunate. The only other big problem with the car is that there is a piece of trim that is broken off. I've seen this trim on eBay. The door handle is a little bit loose. It works just fine, but it's a little loose. But that's certainly there. It shows up in the photographs. The only other thing that I would point out is I do have a couple of cracks. These were just from the sun when I drove the car every other day for 30 years. And it has got so I'll just demonstrate that the power windows are operable. Work perfectly. Power window over here operates perfectly. The back windows are manual. They work perfectly as well, but they're manual. The sunroof. And let's just close it one more time here. Take it out. Normal Mercedes door sound, as you could hear. Everything's very sound about this car. That's probably enough about the story.